Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Trail Network podcast. This is Hilary Yang. Long time no talk. I feel like it's been a few weeks since I've been on the pod. Obviously, I've had a lot going on, as you guys are aware, with the Mammoth. And then I rolled right into a trip to Asia in Hong Kong and China, filming for my new documentary project. So it's been incredible, but it's also been a absolute whirlwind. And shout out to Katie, Rachel, and Leah for holding down the fort on the podcast. But I missed everybody. And I thought this week would be really fun to bring on my co-director for the film that we're working on, Carrie Highman, and just have a little conversation with Carrie about her career and just like where she is in life right now and the stories that she's wanting to tell. And honestly, this was such a beautiful conversation. I really felt like Carrie has so many things to offer as a female filmmaker, and just getting to listen to her stories from some of the films she's made, where she's, spent a lot of time bringing to life stories around women with the just goal of inspiring other women. And I think it's really important to sort of reflect on the power of storytelling and what we can say through that and how it relates to trail running. And so we go into her film called Free to Run, which was about just women in Afghanistan and all the obstacles that they face with running and with life right now, especially. And then her latest film, Off Course, which is premiering at Banff Film Festival at the moment, which is really all about the journey of infertility and motherhood that a lot of women face or navigate challenges around, especially, in their 30s at this time of life when we're also trying to do these big things as athletes. And then finally, we talk a little bit and tease out some of the work that we're doing around our film. So yeah, it's a cool episode. Obviously, it's connected to trail running through the topics that we're covering, but it's also just a look at what it means to be a storyteller, the meaning of telling stories and why that matters, and just hopefully it can serve as an inspiration to all of you to continue pursuing your dreams, whatever they might look like, whether your dream is to be a female storyteller, which we need more of you, or whether it's just to continue to live life in a way that feels meaningful, that touches other people. I think it's important for all of us to step back from the daily routine and sort of have that reflection. So hopefully you enjoyed this conversation. I absolutely love Carrie. She is a treat to spend time with. And without any further ado, we will jump into the podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Trail Network podcast. I'm your host, Hilary Yang, today, and I am joined by my wonderful friend and co-film director, Carrie Highman. Hi, Carrie.
Hi. Hi. Thank you for having me. This is so fun. It's
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it's such a treat to be on here. I mean, we do this all the time anyways. It's just like chat about life, so it's perfect.
It's true. And I think half of the reason that we wanted to record this right now is because we're in withdrawal after spending, 10 days together in Asia and all of the adventures we've had. And I haven't seen you for like a week. And so
I know.
therefore,
Yeah. We haven't had to navigate to where the closest Starbucks is. We haven't shared a room in a whole week.
shared a bed.
Minor details.
I know. No, it's just like so fun to get to do this. And yeah, I'm just really excited for everybody to get to know you a little bit better. And I feel like a lot more people have probably seen your work than they realize or have been touched by your stories. And so it's really fun to be able to have you on the pod today. So thank you for
Thank
carving out the
you.
time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I love what you guys are doing with this. So it's special to be here and exciting to be part of your community. So yeah, I'm really grateful to be here.
Oh, thank you. Well, we thought we would just start with a little bit of an overview on who you are. So for our listeners that aren't familiar with Carrie, Carrie and her husband Tim are the dream team behind Dream Lens Media, which is their film production company. And you've traveled all over the world. You've told incredible stories. You guys have won awards. You've been at amazing, international film festivals. You've had a lot of success with your company, but I know it's also born out of a passion for telling meaningful stories. And I mean, that's where I connected with you. And I think that's where we hit it off, was just like this shared love for having a positive impact in this world and the way that we, tell people stories and inspire people. So, I admire you guys. I love what you do. I also love you as a human. And I feel like, this year we've really gotten a chance to get to know each other and to bond. And you're pretty much like stuck with me for life now. So
Good. The feeling's
Sorry.
mutual. Thank goodness.
Yep. No, but it's just like I felt like I'd known you for years when I got to know you already, and I think that you have that effect on people because you do love people. So, I wanted to start with a little bit of a intro into you, and just like here you are sitting here. You've got a film premiering. We'll get into that. We've got another film on the way. But how did we get here? This has been a little bit of a journey for you over the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fun question to start with because I'm actually sitting in the Banff Mountain Film Center right now. We're here with a film that premiered on Sunday, and we're at the Banff Mountain Film and Book Festival. I think that's the full official title, but it's special being here and being with other filmmakers. And so whenever like we get the chance to share our work, I spend quite a bit of time reflecting on how do we get here, where are we going, dreaming, but then also like celebrating because Hilary, you know this, and any creators who are out there listening to this, like the behind the scenes of ever finishing a film is so complex. It's so gnarly and so much emotion goes into it. At least with these stories that like you and I are telling, right? Like you really get invested in the topics that you're working on. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but the film work that we do is often like very intense, either emotionally or on like a humanitarian side. And so the topics are not like really light that we're working on. So usually there's like a lot of like emotion that kind of ends up in that process. So it's fun to kind of get a chance to look back. So I'll just start with kind of where we got into it. I was a reporter and producer right out of college. So I got a comms degree, got into the news industry, and I really thought that was going to be my career. I loved being in the field every day and just tackling different stories and not sitting behind a desk, obviously, like you do when you're in the edit, but like being out, interviewing people, researching story ideas. And the role that I had with the CBS affiliate that I was working for was a reporter producer role for the first year of my contract. So I got to actually like write the show on the weekends and manage the reporters and the web content and write the full show. And that was a really cool experience because then I got to pair that with in the field reporting. And it just got me so much more like hands-on um, work within like the news realm of what goes into making a show. And then that got amplified the second year of my contract when they had me start anchoring the weekend show. So I was producing and anchoring the weekend show as like
That's a lot of responsibility.
I was like 21, like right out of college, writing the show, anchoring the show, managing the reporters, managing the photog, doing the phone lines, writing the web copy, and then like no one would proof my show because I was the producer. So I'd write the whole show and then go anchor it and be like, it's hopefully I didn't make any mistakes.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, it was wild. And I'd have like whoever was on weather for the weekend would be with me, and then a sports reporter who would do the sports segment. But I really loved that experience because, and I honestly, if everybody could be a reporter right out of college, I think it would like serve society really well because you have to learn how to talk to people. You have to learn how to pick up the phone and like call people who are way out of your league as far as their life experience or their status in society. You have to be able to walk into government buildings and interview mayors, and you have to be okay going into a courtroom and knowing how to like factually cover a murder trial, like all these crazy things. But I was also working at a small station and I was like a daily beat reporter when I was reporting, and it was definitely a grind. And there was this lack of ability to really like spend time and energy on things the way that I wanted to. Like I would get to like dabble in a story idea and then it would have to be like turned by that evening and I'd have to have two different versions of it for different shows. And so I figured out pretty quickly I wanted to do something that allowed me to spend more time on the work that I was doing and have a little bit more say in what I wanted to invest my time in. So at that time in the news industry, everybody would go into marketing or PR if they left the news industry. So the anchors that I talked to and like the mentors I had in the industry were like, yeah, go get a comms degree, work at a university, in their communications department, or work at a hospital and do like be the person who's then bringing in the reporters to do stories on like whatever your initiatives are. And that was just not where it was at for me. Like I was having way too much fun, like actually out in the field shooting and like writing stories and all that kind of stuff. So I just started doing some media for different companies that I knew needed stuff for like online marketing, really simple things, and left the news job, started doing a bunch of that, and I got married. So that was all happening at the same time. Left my news job, married Tim, and started freelancing all within like a couple month window. And Tim is like the entrepreneur. So he was like, don't worry, just dream and start trying stuff and let's see what can happen. And I kept saying like, okay, great, but I don't want any of this to like come back on me. Like you can keep your day job, you keep doing sales, and my stuff will just be like bonus, which is like when I look back on it, like what a little diva, get married and then be like, I don't want any responsibility. Like, what? But
Oh
bless
my
him.
God.
Yeah, can't you just
Sounds
see Tim?
great.
Yeah, you can just see like Tim putting up with that, can't you? Just like, okay, whatever. Oh man. But that turned into Tim getting really interested in it. He was researching gear with me. I started booking different clients. Like we worked for the board certification system for trial attorneys and flew to Philly and like did a piece for them. And Tim would take off work and come with me and run audio and second cam while we were doing all this stuff. And so we just started like getting these gigs that like I needed a crew for, so I didn't have to one-man band the whole time. And he fell in love with it as well. And he was already doing like all the back end, like started the company and like all the accounting and like all that kind of stuff. But eventually just left his day job and we got into it together full time. And at that point, we decided like, okay, marketing videos are great. It's cool to be starting our own thing, but I think we could actually think about what's our dream project. And the journalism side of things has always been such a passion of mine. And I didn't want to just stay in marketing. So we were just taking note of like what did we watch, what did we like to watch, what were we interested in. And Tim and I are both athletes. We love being outside. Like that's kind of where our passion is in the mountains. And so Solomon Trail Running TV was a big thing at the time. I was watching
Oh,
like
it
all
was.
Yes, yeah, it was like exploding. And I watched like all of Dean's work. Like if you don't know, Dean Leslie was the mastermind behind Solomon Trail Running TV. And he just put these heartfelt pieces together on all these athletes that, today are like the old guard of trail running, like played such a big role. And obviously I watched Billy's stuff too. I watched Life in a Day. It was one of my first trail running
Is he
films that
part of
I
the old
watched.
guard?
Yeah. I shouldn't say that. Don't let him hear me say
Oh,
that.
it's okay. Oh man, I'll tell him
the,
later.
the athletes that were in these films. I don't know. Now
Yeah,
I've probably
yeah.
thrown some athletes under the bus too accidentally, but you know what I mean? Like
The
the
OGs.
OGs. Yes, who are like crafting the storytelling around the sport when the sport was really growing. Like this was my entrance into that world. And I loved what Billy was making. I loved what Dean was making. And we were introduced to Kevin Schmidt's cousin, Courtney's husband's cousin. And we
Yep.
told him what we were wanting to get into. And it was like right before she ran Moab. She had just set the 24-hour American record. And Kevin's cousin Ryan was like, oh, if you guys want to make trail running films, my cousin's wife is a pretty good ultra runner and I can introduce you guys. So
That's
then
so
he like,
funny.
yeah, he
She's all
connected
right.
us. Yeah, she's pretty good. Connected us on email. I got on a call with Courtney. This was like 2017 or something. And we just like had a great chat. And we went out and filmed a little project with her and Kevin. And obviously, like if that's your intro into ultra trail, it's pretty hard not to fall in love with the sport when like Courtney's introducing you to the sport, because her love of it is just like so contagious. So that was a perfect intro for us to like really get sucked in between what we were already watching and then like being on the ground with Courtney experiencing that was just super fun. So we were kind of hooked on the trail running side of it, but also just on adventure sports. So we started working with Outside TV and did some short films for them that went into their Dispatches series. And that got us out in California, working with like a surfer and some Marine Raiders who were doing deep water training with them. And we did a winter ultra up on the border of Minnesota and Canada. We did a film up there on a type 1 diabetic woman who was racing these gnarly winter ultra marathons. And
Is that
we
the
filmed,
Arrowhead?
yeah, Arrowhead.
Arrowhead 135. Yeah.
Yeah, Arrowhead 135. That was a crazy race. What
Yeah,
a
no, never want to do that. Not on my bucket list, but looks gnarly. The photos are great.
Yeah, it's so gnarly. And then she also ran to Scobia, the character of our film, and that one's in Wisconsin, like over Christmas. And that one's almost worse in the sense that it's like an old railroad trail. So it's just this straight out and it's an out and back. You go all the way out for like 60 miles or something, and then you just turn around and go all the way back on this flat trail.
Nope.
It's so bad.
It's a lot
It's
of
so
nope.
it's so bad. But yeah. Anyways, I've totally lost my train of thought. But kind of just like getting into the sports space and starting to make more running films. Um, we
So
kind of
let me
just
jump in. Yeah, let me
please
jump in here
save me.
because, well, no, it's sort of interesting. Like you found Courtney at a kind of moment in time where she hadn't become who she is. And I find it interesting when you have these life intersections. And I think about this every time someone's like, oh, there's this athlete that you should connect with. And like they're up and coming and they might have this moment. And sometimes as a filmmaker, you take a bit of a flyer on someone because you believe in them or you think they have that potential. And then you just sort of hope that it's going to grow into something. I mean, her career has obviously grown into something beyond like what anyone could have imagined was possible. But I just think that's really cool that you were in a similar place in life and so was she. And in a sense, you're sort of taking a chance on each other as far as like, let's make something. And you did end up following her at Tahoe and you made a beautiful film about that. And that was, I think, where I first heard about you guys was because of your work through Courtney. And it was sort of cool. It was like, oh, this husband and wife team. Have you heard of them? They're really cool. They're like traveling around and you know, like it must be interesting for you to kind of look at that now in the context of the years that have passed by since and how, you know, like that's just one step in your career and you've gone on to tell all these different stories. But how interesting to sort of like collide it into Courtney at this moment in time and then to kind of be exposed to her, you know, trajectory in trail running, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's something that Tim and I like always feel very fond of and reflect on was, at that point in our career. And I think, for a lot of people, like you said, depending on where you're at and what you're passionate about, you have these little intersections and you don't know what's going to come of it. And part of the approach we took was just like, saying yes, 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 and, like, yes, we'd like to try this, and what else is possible? And that's hard as a creative because we invested time and energy in a ton of different projects that we never got to make or never saw the light of day or didn't turn into anything. Um, we footed our own bill out to Tahoe to make that film because we were passionate about it and wanted to spend time with the Dew Crew for a whole weekend. Like that sounded like the best thing ever. So, yeah, it is an interesting thing to reflect on because you can look at these ones that like the source, which is the film you're referencing, was like really our way of finding out if this is something we wanted to spend our time and energy on. It really was like the longest thing we'd ever made. It's around a 40-minute film. And we were able to tie in stuff that we used when we first shot with her out in Boulder and then build backstory with that into the Tahoe film. And yeah, it was a really special thing for us to kind of get started in that way. And then just to be able to cheer on her career from there and then intersect at races or get to hang out in between things and just I don't know. I was just filming with Courtney for Hilary for our project, and
Mhm.
I think we're figuring out that we're like a year away from our 10-year friendship anniversary.
That's
So
amazing.
these are like really fun things that come out of the work that we do that I think is really special. And yeah, the source played a really big role in us feeling like, yeah, we have something we wanna say, and we have a passion of, like, coming alongside athletes in their journeys and being able to allow people to be inspired by what they're doing. And that film, we shot it over a weekend, and then we had a weekend with Courtney in Boulder from the year prior, but that film ended up reaching I think it's been viewed maybe more than 3 million times, and the comments under it are what I love the most because you'll read stuff like, "I watched this and now I just went out and ran my first 5K," or, "I watched this and it gave me the courage to quit smoking because it felt impossible, but if she can do this, then I can try to quit smoking," and I think the realization of, like, you can tell stories through sport that actually go so far beyond whatever that event was and the impact that can have on people's lives based on how they take away inspiration from what Courtney went out and did in that race is actually changing their life and like changing the trajectory of their life. And to be able to play a small role in that, like to be the connector of like helping people access that story and then have their lives changed is such a like that it's a pretty incredible thing. Like I feel so lucky to be able to do that.
That was so well said. And I think that is the power of storytelling. That's the thing that both of us have fallen in love with about it is that most people on this planet will never run 200 miles, but what they get out of seeing someone like Courtney do it and the attitude and the resilience and the overcoming. I mean, it's the same reason I fell in love with the Mammoth 200 and the idea of like kind of facilitating this experience. It's sort of like these things are inspirational, but they are still attainable in the sense that like we can all go out and push ourselves and we can all go out and do these things, whatever scale that is on. And so to be able to tell a story that reaches people and has touched so many people, I think, yeah, it's just like really such a privilege, isn't it? And
It
to be
really
let in
is.
to someone's world like that too.
Yes, yes, 100%. And I think the being let in part is like a really significant thing. Like, um, I think as a creative, you can you start to find out like, oh yeah, I can just reach out and ask this person, hey, do you want to make something? Hey, do you feel passionate about having something said through film? And that's like a really cool exploratory process of like finding where you can fit with people and how you can align with different athletes and find that you're a good fit together to be able to share something meaningful. And then like that can live on for a really long time. I mean, we made that film back in I don't know, when did we launch it? 2019, I think. And I still have people messaging me about it and they have it on their like rewatch list for when they train for a marathon or they train
Hmm.
for their next race and they just rewatch it because of how Courtney let us in to document her experience, and the vulnerability with which she like just let that be captured. So anyways, I don't mean to go on forever about that, but it is a really special thing I think about what we do.
Yes. And I think, I mean, I want to sort of carry on with your career, but also it's like so easy to get sucked into these side conversations that I'm very passionate about, which is just like the reason that women need to tell stories is because we connect with other women and we have a different approach as far as how we relate to the person we're filming. And that relationship is really important. And you can't make a film without having an open, trusting relationship with your subject. And it's a partnership. And I think just to kind of put that out there for all the women that are sort of like inspired or wanting to get into media. I just really truly believe that women have a gift for connecting with people and should tell more stories, and we need more women telling stories. So, side note, but it's just like a common thread that runs through a lot of, I think, our narrative today is just like your ability to connect and your ability to like create those relationships, I think is huge and something that's really I mean, I've seen it firsthand through our work together so far, and it's just like cool to kind of see that thread continue and how that can inspire
Mm.
people. So, yes, we're going to do a lot of digressing today, you guys.
But I want to say before we carry on with that, often I have people ask me, so for ladies who are wanting to get into the creative industry, people ask me like, how did you find your stories or like who approached you to make a film? It's like I DM'd and or emailed and or called every woman that I've worked with. So the worst that can happen is they don't respond or they say they're not interested. And I've had that happen too. And that's not so scary. Like once you get through one or two of those, you're like, oh yeah, that's chill. Like I'm just going to keep asking and see what's out there. So slide into someone's DMs, get an introduction, call them up, email them. And especially in our space, like I feel like female athletes, they're in lockstep with us as women creators in wanting to work with and collaborate with more women. So now is such a good time to be reaching out and just like taking the risks and seeing what you can make, because I think we're all on that wavelength right now of like, okay, we've got some work to do and let's do it together.
Quick break to thank Osprey for sponsoring this episode of the show. Osprey has been a leading maker of premium outdoor backpacks and bags for over 50 years. There are many reasons I turned to Osprey, but one is because of their pillars of sourcing sustainable materials. By incorporating recycled and Blue Sign approved materials into their products, they're helping to keep harmful chemicals out of our environment. Osprey has eliminated PFAS-based durable water repellent in 100% of their textile products, and as of fall 2024, 100% of Osprey's products have 100% recycled content in the lining fabric, and 99% of Osprey's products have 100% recycled content in the main body fabric. Osprey continues to reduce environmental impacts and produce more sustainably designed products every year. This is the type of company I want to support, and I know you do too. Learn more at osprey.com. Now back to the show.
Okay, I want to get into kind of where the source took you and how you ended up working on Free to Run, because I feel like that was an evolution of kind of a merging of passions. Like that was the running piece, which you discovered through maybe working with Courtney and being exposed to the ultra running world and sort of like that being pulled into your sphere, but also more of a journalism sense, which goes back to your broadcast background and just that feeling of telling stories that are bigger than running, but that people can relate to through running. And so for those of our listeners that aren't familiar with Free to Run, maybe give us a little bit of an overview of how that project first came on your radar and how, like how you felt inspired to tell that story, because I think that story is, again, just feeding into this like whole conversation we're having around, why it matters.
Yeah, for sure. I think as a creative, and I think just as a dreamer, I think like anybody who finds themselves like dreaming about things, like you can identify with this experience. But I was just thinking of different like story ideas or things I wanted to explore, things I was curious about. And I had stepped out my door and I had a trail right out my door where we were living at the time in Wisconsin, actually. And I stepped out the door to go for a run, and it kind of like hit me how lucky I was to be able to be safe enough to just like step out my door and go for a run. And like that was my lived experience. Every day I could do that. And then it just triggered a thought of like, okay, what about women in the world who don't have that opportunity? And after that thought happened, then it was like, okay, where is this happening and who's working on this and what's the reality? And the research started. And that's when I had someone refer me to Stephanie Case and the work she was doing with her NGO Free to Run in Afghanistan. And we had gone overseas and went to visit some friends in Switzerland, and UTMB was happening at the time. So we went over to UTMB for the first time and we're like all inspired being around that whole energy. And I was like, I'm just going to message her. And I don't see any docs done on Steph or on Free to Run. Like I see news coverage, but like no docs. And this would be really incredible. Just to give a little bit more background on Free to Run, it's an NGO that Steph started in Afghanistan. And the point is to work alongside women in communities to get girls out in public participating in sport. And they focused a lot on trail running. And yeah, so that was like the idea. So I DM'd her while we were in Lausanne, Switzerland with our friends right after UTMB. And she messaged me back and said, yeah, let's talk. And I got the full rundown on Free to Run and how she'd come up with the idea, where the organization was at the time. And then we found out that they were planning an expedition in the Walk-On Corridor in Afghanistan for the following, it was like the next year or two, maybe. And that's like if you're looking at a map, it's like the far right-hand corner of Afghanistan. It's this really remote mountain range up there. And they had been planning for a while to take women from all over the country and different like ethnic groups together as part of the organization out on this like 10-day expedition through the Walk-On Corridor. So it felt like what a perfect way to start like exploring what this NGO is doing, get to know the Afghan women, and start like really diving into what was happening as a movement over there in the country and amongst the women there. And then obviously like feature Steph's work with the UN. She was a human rights officer at the time in Afghanistan, and we were going to tie all of this into like one big film. Then COVID hit, then Steph switched jobs, I think, and then eventually we got to like 2020 something, 2021 maybe, or 20, it doesn't matter. My gosh. But the North Face came on to support a short film, and the Walk-On expedition was going to happen the summer of 2021. And Steph was running with the North Face at that time. So we were going to do this piece that followed sort of the origins of Free to Run, film with the girls in Afghanistan, and then put it all together into a film. And 2 weeks before we were supposed to touch down in Afghanistan, in the Walk-On Corridor, the Taliban took that province. And our whole narrative changed. And I remember
You
we were
had your
in
visas and everything, right?
Yep, we
Like
had
you
our
were ready to
visas.
go?
We had like our expedition kit ready. Tim had done all this research on like how to charge our gear off grid for 10 days because we weren't going to have access to like anything. We were talking sat phones and we are going to have to take this like little plane from Kabul out into like closer to there and then take another bus for 2 hours or whatever. It was like a lot of work and planning going into this concept. And we'd been watching the news. Obviously, things were getting like a little bit
Not great.
tumultuous. Yeah. But I like obviously we all know this in hindsight now, like nobody anticipated it to progress as fast as it did. So yeah, we didn't get to go, which was really heartbreaking, but we were still able to pivot and figure out like how to tell a story that still honored the women and what they were experiencing. And two of the girls that we were going to feature in the film were on Fulbright scholarships, and they were on their way over to the States. So we knew it would be safe for us to tell their stories because they would be leaving the country. Um, so we reapproached the short film, repitched it like 3 times, reworked the whole pitch and brief at least 3 times throughout the course of the project. And Steph had a window to get in to meet with the free to run staff, but our visas weren't starting for another week, so we couldn't go with her. So we found through a referral an Aussie filmmaker that lived in Kabul full time, and she had worked with other NGOs. And he got on a call with us. We shot on all the same kit. He had the same methodology. Like I talked through with him, like how do you approach your film subjects and how do you shoot and like what's your style and like all the stuff and everything like lined up. And he was free for those 2 days that Steph was going to be in country. So he shot for 2 days with Steph and our 2 Afghan subjects, and that was huge for our project because otherwise like we couldn't have told it because Tim and I couldn't get in the country. And then after that, obviously it was like fully closed. So that was incredible. Shout out to Jordan because
Wow.
he really came through and that was really, really awesome. But yeah, that film basically allowed us to like really get in deep on like more humanitarian and geopolitical situations happening around the world and merge that with sport and then engage this audience, this adventure sport audience who might not click on a humanitarian doc, but would click on a documentary about some crazy ultramarathon in the Alps and then get them invested in humanitarian issues around the world. So like a little bit of a bait and switch, if I'm being perfectly honest, but I can live with that, I think.
Which, I mean, I find that kind of fascinating. First of all, I think the resilience that you guys had in telling that story is worth noting because, as a freelance filmmaker, you kind of have this dream and maybe it gets funded and you get all the approval and then you can't totally control where the story goes, right? We're not scripting this thing. And so you're very much following the story and it can be very discouraging if that changes. And I think it's a testimony to you guys and just like, really believing in it that you're still willing to pursue it and you were still like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's figure out how to tell a story. But I think that's something that you really do have to cultivate if you want to have a career in media is that ability to just like be flexible and sort of like hold it loosely, but also care enough to follow it and to just like make it work. And what came out of it is such a beautiful story. And so I'm so glad that you did stick with it, but it would have been so easy to just go like, oh, well, not this time, like better luck next time. And I think that tenacity that you have is like, one of the biggest things that you do have to go into this whole field with.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'm glad you highlighted that because I do think what's been really encouraging for me as a creator when I'm listening to podcasts or I'm meeting other creatives is for them to be real about the cost to make something. And I don't just mean financial cost, I mean like mental, emotional, and well-being cost as well. And I want to make sure I do that for creators that I'm talking to as well. I mean, with the free to run piece, we didn't actually receive any funding for that project until it was fully shot. So all of the travel, all of the kit, all of anything that went into getting Tim and I anywhere, hiring anybody, it all went on our credit cards because it was that or we missed the story. Like we couldn't make corporate worlds work any faster than they were. So that was our option. And we chose to do that route because we were that passionate about it. And it could have turned out where that funding never came through and we had to swallow all of that. And that has happened to us on other projects. So there is like this really tricky balance of like, how much are you willing to sacrifice and risk in the name of the story that you want to tell. And emotionally and mentally, like, that was a really brutal year for us. Like, our family had to like our family and friends were like piecing us back together that fall. Like, when we got done with it, like at one point my hair was like falling out because the stress level was so high. Like, it was it came at a very high cost, like mentally, emotionally, and financially. So,
It's a
um,
great career, guys. Make sure you go into it.
am I selling it well enough at this point? Um, but we, if you're going to sacrifice, I think, on that level for a project, to me, to Tim and I, it has to be something where like we feel like the story is dire enough to be told. And for us, like hearing what Zara and Zainab in the film, how passionate they were about exposing themselves and doing interviews with us when they were experiencing severely traumatic situations, because they felt it was so important to communicate that message and they felt that responsibility. There was like this, like, okay, if our film subjects are going to go here with their level of emotional and mental sacrifice, we're going to meet them there. And we have their backs in that sense. And so that made like everything worth it. Now, if it was a film where it was just like, we were going to, we wanted to like fly to all these cool places and like, I don't know, follow something like, and all of that, I don't know that we would have made the same sacrifices. So I think it's also like you pick and choose, like, when does something feel like you're so compelled to stick with it that you have to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's when you know you've found something that's bigger than a job and it's more of a purpose. And it sounds sort of like whatever to say that, but like it's a that's incredible when you can find something that matters enough that you're willing to sort of like pour that much into it. And I mean, I want to say the same about your newest film, which is at Banff as well. But just to sort of like button up the story on Free to Run, like it did go on to be really successful and go to all these film festivals around the world, and it has had a tremendous impact. And so, just sort of your thoughts on that, of sort of like seeing the reception to it and seeing, like you said, the sort of merging of the journalism with the running and how you can impact people that might not otherwise have been exposed to a story like that.
Yeah, I think when I reflect on like the impact of that film, there's two things that make me feel the most like I don't have any doubts on what we put into making sure that project lived. One is, I know that it had impact for the organization Free to Run, which has not given up on women and girls in Afghanistan in spite of the fact that they can't operate the way that they used to. The whole premise of the organization was to get women seen in society. And if you've followed at the news at all in Afghanistan, it's obviously digressed to a point where women have almost all but been erased from society visibly, but they're still at work in communities. They're working with women in the capacity that they can. And the women want it. They want that access to the services that Free to Run is providing. So I know the film had impact as far as continuing to build support for the organization, which I'm really proud of because I know they're doing really important work. And then the second piece that I kind of always hang on to is there was a woman who came on to work with Free to Run in Iraq for their Iraq programming, and I met her on a call, and she told me that she'd seen the film, and then that is what led her to apply to Free to Run, and now she works with women and girls in Erbil, and that was a really cool moment because it felt like, okay, it's having an impact for the women and girls through this organization because this film was supported by film festivals like Banff and other places and was able to get out. And the message that Zara and Zainab shared and that Steph shared did reach audiences around the world. And that I think I feel very grateful for.
That just gave me goosebumps. That's really cool. And I think that is where that's the ultimate payoff, like it's cool when things get seen and when we get that validation, but when you see the real world application like that, that's extra special.
Yeah, for
Let's
sure.
let's talk a little bit about your newest film, which is at Banff right now and is another, I would say, level of you sort of continuing the journey of telling stories that matter and are bigger than just running. Do you want to just like give us a little bit of a synopsis on that film and some of the labor of love that went into that and getting it to where it is now?
For sure, yeah. So the film is named Off Course, and it follows Stephanie Case. Again, this one actually started, I think, less than a year after we had finished Free Run. She called us up with this concept based on what was happening in her life. And then it also follows ultramarathon runner Sophie Grant. She's a Kiwi, runs for La Sportiva. And the two of them are close friends. And Steph had approached us after her first miscarriage. She had been pregnant racing hard rock in 2022, didn't know it, tested after the fact, found out she was pregnant. She miscarried. When she called us, she was pregnant for the second time, and she wanted to see if we wanted to make a film about some of the stigma and shame around miscarriage and running. And we talked out like what her experience had been thus far, just sort of where the gap of research is for women in sport when it comes to navigating fertility. And it just felt like, yeah, we got to tell this story. Like we've done a pretty good job in the last, 5 or 10 years starting to highlight stories of mothers returning to sport. But the whole getting to that point is something that we still hadn't been talking about much. So Steph ended up miscarrying that pregnancy as well, and that led into an IVF journey for her. And then her good friend Sophie was also struggling with fertility as well. So we followed both of them, and we thought it was going to be a year project, and it turned into a 3-year film project. So a very extended timeline. And I don't want to give too much away because hopefully you'll watch the film. It'll be online, so I can give you that info too for where you can watch it with Banff. Here on the 12th, I think is when it comes out. But basically, we followed both of their journeys straight through. And in the midst of their fertility journeys, they race some of our incredible ultramarathon races around the world, like Tour des Géants in the Italian Alps, 350K, the Hard Rock 100 in the San Juans in Colorado. We have a UTMB race in there. We've got Snowdonia 100K in the UK. And I'm sure I'm forgetting one, but it was a very intense project because we were with the women from start to finish of both of their fertility journeys. And it included a lot of self-documenting from the women when we weren't able to be present for what was happening in their life. So very, very emotional. They both really didn't hold back on sharing their experience. And they both felt very passionate about regardless of outcome for either one of them, letting their stories be seen on camera with the hopes of then creating space for this to be something that we talk about more freely, more openly, that women and their partners feel less alone in going through that process. And the sharing of information is huge because when it comes to fertility and running, it's a very hard thing to study. Why is miscarriage happening? Is running the enemy? These are the questions that women can really struggle with. And I'm not speaking from experience. I'm speaking as the filmmaker, having been invested in the topic. So I don't want to act like I know other than from the way that I've been invested in this story with Sophie and Steph. But the amount of knowledge sharing that we can do for each other when we're able to have these conversations, I think is also huge. And just encouragement of if the research doesn't show, which it doesn't, the research does not show that running causes miscarriage. And I'm quoting a doctor that I interviewed in Chamonix, actually. So that's the research there. If it doesn't show that, but it's so ingrained in our minds and in our hearts that when we put on our shoes and step out the door, we could be the problem. These are the things that I think we need to be able to talk about as women, and that I'm hoping, and I know Steph and Sophie are really hoping come from this film, of just being able to have these conversations together in this space and encourage each other as we're all navigating, well, not everyone, but a lot of women are navigating this in our sport.
I mean, I think it's such a beautiful topic. I was actually struggling not to tear up a little bit when you're talking about it because I think it is so personal for so many of us. And, like I've shared with you, I haven't been able to watch your film yet because I've also had, some struggles this past year, which I haven't gone into a lot yet. But I think I don't think there's a single woman out there, whether you've had a child or not had a child, that hasn't been confronted by some of these questions or fears. And I know even for you as a, woman making this film, it's emotionally difficult and often devastating to kind of be in that moment and hold space for it. And yet it's so important. And it's really struck me how many people have a painful story around this in some way, right? Like whether you end up with a baby, whether you don't, whatever your life looks like, we hold a lot of pain and a lot of kind of feelings around this. And so I think it's beautiful that you've told the story, and I know how much you poured into it and how much, Steph and Sophie both poured into it. And I think that honesty is so important. So, from your perspective, Free to Run was very stressful to make on one level. Of course, I think was also kind of emotionally stressful in the sense of just like to sit with that feelings and to sit with all of the heartbreak and to sit with everything to tell the story is, like I think really hard as well. So can you just give us a little bit of insight into like how you are able to kind of approach that, and when you recognize that you need to take a breath from it, and like how you've sort of like worked your way through it? Because I think it's really brave also to tell stories that are so difficult to tell.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that over the last like couple years, I have really wrestled with the emotional engagement that I end up taking in my film subjects and in my projects. And I think in other professional spheres, it's really easy to talk about like having professional boundaries and emotional boundaries and these types of things. But I have found that really difficult with filmmaking because of the topics that we're tackling and because of just like how emotionally invested I am in both the characters and in the topic. And so I think this year in the edit of Off Course, I think is like the first time I just let myself be like, you know what? I think this is just how I am. Like this is who I'm just going to be emotionally invested, and I'm going to feel things really, really deeply. And I can fight that for the rest of my life, or I can just like accept that that's who I am and see how I can manage that within a project to keep it like healthy and let it benefit with my work without like putting me in a space that I can't function. And I've had some like really great friends who are really wise in that space and know how to like guide me in learning how to grow and being able to like sit with this type of content and sit with my film subjects and sit with pain that's not my own, but that I'm bearing witness to with my film subjects, and figure out how to hold it and then release it in a way that allows me to finish a project. One thing is I cry in interviews with my film subjects, and I've kind of had to come to accept that. And I might need a minute after an interview. Like once I have a heavy interview with a film subject and they're crying and then I start crying, like I might just need a minute afterwards, and I'm sure they do too, obviously, but like I'll just take breaks that I need to take after that, but not fighting that emotion when I'm with my subjects, because we're in a conversation together of we're both putting our hearts on the line with each other to then allow an audience to watch it. So I view the interview process as like a very collaborative experience where like I am meeting their level of vulnerability because they're extending to me, and I'm not going to hold back and not extend to them. I'm going to be in that moment with them. So that's something that I've just kind of accepted as like, that's just, if I'm going to be doing hard topics, that's going to be how I'm going to handle the interviews. And then when it comes to the edit, I struggled a lot watching back some of the self-documentation with the girls and some of the interviews that we did, like rewatching those, um, like to the point where there was one afternoon where I just started crying and like couldn't stop crying for like 30 minutes and had to just totally walk away and like not work for the rest of the afternoon because I was feeling so much grief for the women that we were working with. And I think what I had to do was figure out that the grief that I was feeling was my love for them, but I wasn't internalizing their experience and applying it to my own experience. And that's something that I'm having to continue to acknowledge, because while my story doesn't mirror theirs, I am also at an age in life where I'm struggling with trying to figure out, like Tim and I don't know if we're going to pursue having children. And I wrestle with that a lot. And, um, making sure that I have this gap of like, I'm feeling their pain, but I'm not now turning that into something where I'm making this story about myself, or I'm analyzing their experiencing and applying it to myself, like keeping those things separate. But when I am in the midst of like really feeling their pain, just having to take a break and set it down and have like my loved ones who I can call and that can just like talk it out with me and realize. And, you know, I had this with when I filmed with Zara and Zainab as well for Free to Run. Like Zainab filmed with us like days after she was on, I don't know if you all remember this from Afghanistan or not, but when everything was happening at the airport and there was that massive airplane going and people running, and she was seeing that through the plane window that she was sitting on, like in real time. And we interviewed with her less than a week from when she got to the US and had left all of her loved ones behind and had witnessed her people experiencing that on the tarmac. And it still is one of the hardest interviews that I've ever done and experienced. And that one, like, I think I'm probably still trying to process because her bravery in sharing that, but then reliving that in the edit with her. Yeah, it just takes like a huge emotional toll, and you have to take breaks and you have to walk away from it, and you have to have like people in your life who really love you and can help you process it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing all of that. And I think just on a human level, I think it's really important to think about not just the story, but also the person telling the story. And in your and Tim's case, you know, you guys care so deeply. You pour so much of yourselves into these stories. And I think I don't know, I find when I can humanize the people telling the story, it makes it even more powerful because it really is this like little team that cares so much about getting this message out, whether you're the one in front of the camera or behind the camera. And I think that that's really, you know, brave for you to tell these stories because it would be easier in some ways to tell stories that were all just sort of positive and kind of, you know, like took less of a toll on you, but then they wouldn't have that same impact. And so there is sort of that trade-off. And I think, you know, even acknowledging that you are just someone that feels it a lot and that's okay. And you know, like it's just the way you are. And I think the thing you can do, and something we've talked about in all of our many hours of traveling and spending time together, is just like about how we protect ourselves in a way where we can be sustainable with doing these things. Because when you care so much, it is easy to burn out because you do end up sort of just not knowing how to keep processing and keep, you know, being in this place. So I think, you know, that's just something I'm really glad you're able to share. And I think it's really important. If you're getting into filmmaking or storytelling, it's good to recognize, but also just in general, I think for all of us to recognize that telling these stories is beautiful, but it's also, it's its own sort of emotional journey. And so, you know, you get to now hopefully have the flip side of all of that, sitting with it and see people react to the story and respond to the story. And, you know, like, I think there is so much power in that. And I know people are going to just get so much out of this film. So I'm really, really proud of you guys and proud of what you've created. Katie Asmuth wanted me to give a shout out to the time she spent with you at Hard Rock this year filming for Steph Case's film, which was really fun because I was obviously running this year and then you guys were out filming with Steph as sort of the, you know, the final piece of her story. And I know Katie got to spend some time with you running around with a GoPro and she was really excited. And so shout out to Katie, and she wanted to send her love and just say how much fun it was to spend time with you out there. But just so cool to be able to kind of bring that whole story full circle at Hard Rock, right?
Yeah, that was really special. And Katie, shout out right back to you because that was so much fun. Boy, if you think Katie's fun, like out on course, have her join your production team and you're in for a treat. That was an awesome afternoon. We had so much fun.
I mean, Katie is just like, she brings the energy. So she went from, you know, being part of your production crew to joining my crew, and then like being my crew leader and cheerleader at Telluride, which was really fun. And so, yeah, she was everywhere during that race and just like lifting all of us up. But she does. Yeah. Number one hype girl.
Real quick, before we move on, Hilary, I just wanted to say for any other creators that are listening, like what you said about like what creators are experiencing, especially when you work on films that are about really intense topics for your film subjects. There's this tendency to like ignore your experience as the film creator because it feels like, well, I didn't live it. Like I didn't live it. I'm telling the story of my film subjects. So to have other creatives who understand what you're going through is huge. And Hilary, you've been like massive in that for me. Like while we were traveling, just my ability to process with you as a fellow creator who understood what it's like to be on my side of the creative process was huge and instrumental and continues to be. Like, even while I was sitting in the theater, I'm like texting Hilary, like, oh, I want to fix that transition or like this or that. And she's like, chill out. Like, everything's fine. Like, this is okay. But that's huge. And it's hard to find. But I would encourage women listening to this, like, as much as I would encourage you to reach out to the women that you want to work with, also reach out to us who are in the industry, because I cannot express enough how impactful it is to my sanity and to my growth as a human to have someone like Hilary able to have these conversations with me.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's such a privilege to be led into that with you because I know it's like something we don't talk about a lot and you don't necessarily want to lead with that when you're making this a career, but I think it's something I've really realized and it's something I really value is building a little support crew of fellow creatives and especially other women. There needs to be more of us. I'll just keep saying that over and over again. But yeah, just sort of, I think, realizing that that really does make a difference.
Hey all, Katie here with a quick break to announce we have a new sponsor. Drum roll, please. Precision Fuel and Hydration. We are thrilled to partner with Precision because we get to rave about what amazing products they have. But first, I highly encourage you to check out Precision Fuel and Hydration's free online planner that will help you figure out exactly how much carbs, sodium, and fluid you will need for your next race. It is super helpful. Use the planner and then get 15% off your first order with code TTNP15. That's again TTNP, like the Trail Network podcast, TTNP15. Each purchase helps support the show and boosts your performance too. Now, back to the show.
All right, so I want to pivot a little bit just because I know we both have to get back to editing this project that we're working on. But I also wanted to just tease out that project a little bit. And our listeners will be familiar with it because I've been talking about it for a while. And that's our film. I don't think we've actually teased out the title yet, but maybe I'll save that for a little bit. It's our film around the women at Western States, which we started working on together at the end of April. And, just going back to what you were saying, Carrie, about sort of pursuing the things that we want to tell stories around, this was something where we took the story to Hoka. We sort of had the dream of what we wanted to tell. And then they came on board and we're just like, absolutely, this is important. We want to support this and tell more stories about women. And so, it's something where we've kind of like created the story that we want to tell. And that's something I think is worth noting. So, like none of these things just fall in your lap, folks. You want them, you go get them. But I'm so excited. And honestly, Carrie, we'd had the chance to meet but not work together yet. And selfishly, I just wanted an excuse to be able to create something with you. And I think that's been like one of the highlights of this whole experience is just getting to work with you, getting to travel and do these hometown visits with our athletes. And I mean, just over a week ago, we got back from the last of the hometown visits, which was its own adventure. And I thought we could kind of close out our little pod by talking a little bit about our trip to China, which is why I've been absent for a few weeks from the podcast. Basically went from the Mammoth right into a casual trip to Hong Kong and mainland China. So no big deal. It's been busy. But I'm so grateful for you. And I feel like, I mean, we were working hard, but also we had a blast, and that was really fun to be able to do a trip like that could be stressful. And, you're in a lot of uncomfortable situations, but I feel like we just had so much fun. And it really did feel like kind of a girls' trip, but also where we're like, busting our butts and proud of what we're
Yeah.
creating and having to kind of like hit all these things and make sure we nail it all. But doing it with you was amazing. So, yeah, do you want to just like tell us a little bit of your thoughts on our trip and maybe like some of the things that surprised you or just like felt kind of cool about the whole experience?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that that was such a highlight. Like I feel like we were both just on cloud. I mean, we maybe had like an hour or two here or there throughout the 10 days where we were like, oh man, we're worked or like traveling is like wearing us down or something. But other than that, I feel like we were like cloud nine the whole trip. I think the hardest thing for me on that trip was keeping up with Hillary's long legs while we were walking through the city.
I've been told that before.
I was like, I texted him, I was like, I'm dripping in sweat. I cannot keep up with her. Like, this is insane.
Efficient, okay?
Yeah, it was no, it was good. And it made me push my pace, so that's good. But um yeah, that was such a fun experience. So we went to Hong Kong first, and then we flew from there into mainland China. And gosh, I mean, I think there were so many highlights for me. One thing that I know, Hilary, you and I were really excited about was getting to see what the trail scene was like in China because, we often are just kind of in our little like Western bubble of trail running. So getting to actually see what they're building over there for the trail scene was awesome. I don't know if you want to say more on that.
Just that it's wild and like lookout world because there's so many talented Chinese trail runners and the vibrancy around the trail scene there. Like so we flew from Hong Kong where we were filming with Esther Tealeg into Ninghai, which is mainland China on the coast, sort of like south of Shanghai area. And from there, we met up with Fu Zhao's crew and she raced the 100K at the Ultra Trail Ninghai. Um, and so that was sort of cool because that was a UTMB event that was, on mainland China, 5,000 runners. They had the 100K was sort of the premier distance. Fu Zhao has won it 3 times and set the course record last year. I think she keeps setting her own course records on it, but um, that 5,000 people. And it was interesting because like the race expo and all that, like it's sponsored by Hoka. There's a similar flavor to a lot of the UTMB races. And in that sense, I find it kind of fascinating because here you are in China and yet the signs have English on them. And a lot of it feels sort of like similarly set up. And I kind of like that because I think what an interesting way to travel to be able to like go to these races and there's a structure to it that feels familiar and yet you're somewhere so different. And just seeing Fu Zhao, she's like, I kept saying to Carrie that she's like Courtney DeWalter over there because she really is. And she's the crowd favorite. And everywhere we went, it was just like she would get kind of swarmed as soon as people noticed her. And her manager, JJ, who shout out to JJ, he was just like incredible and toured us around and made sure we were safe and knew we were going the whole time. And just like, both Fujao and JJ were so hospitable, but he was like her bodyguard. We'd go through the crowds and he was like 6.5 feet tall and he'd just sort of like be this little protective bubble because people were just so excited to see her and wanted photos. And so for us, I think, we know Fujao in the context of her time in the US and internationally, where she's an incredible athlete, but doesn't have the same recognition that she does at home. And I thought that was just like so much fun, just seeing that
Yeah,
and
it is
the
so fun.
excitement.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so many women running the races there. And like,
Yes.
that was really, we were out at the aid stations. And first of all, which was so cool because you're up in these mountain villages, you're in the clouds. It just gorgeous, like everything you kind of picture if you think of like the trails up there. But
Yeah.
so many women and they're just rocking it and having so much fun. And it just
Yeah.
like kind of blew us away. The energy was amazing.
The energy was so good. And it was really cool to go through the different like little mountain towns along the course and just see the whole town show up for these aid stations and like make it a party. And that was really cool. And to see everyone really proud of like the local food they had at their aid stations. Like Hillary and I were talking about how as media, you just, there's very strict rules on aid stations. You would never dream of taking something from an aid station food wise as a filmmaker. And then we would show up in these towns and the organizers would come over and like lead us over to the table and be like, try that. These are all of our local cuisines. Try all of them. And that was really fun.
And
Just
every
to
aid
try all the different
station
stuff.
had a different theme or a different dumpling or a different thing that was like their specialty. But yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. They were so like the food is such a big part of the culture there. And I mean, it was just amazing. It was really, really fun because it added a whole other element to the race of just like getting to try all these things and just like seeing how much they kind of pour into the race experience, right? Like all these homemade foods and the villagers all showing up to cheer and sort of like getting into it and like how cool for them to be part of it and experience it. So many people were coming up to us because like these are not areas that see a lot of tourists. And I think they were really excited to have us here or have us there and just like we're so welcoming kind of blew us away, the whole experience. It was really, really fun. Yeah, just to kind of take it
Yeah.
all in, and just the
Yeah.
scale. Like, I mean, when we were filming with Fuzhou in her hometown, which is not that far away, um, like there was a race happening that weekend with 10,000 runners. Like, that's insane. Like, this is
It's
so
insane.
many people. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I'm like, man, we had 130 at the Mammoth. I cannot even imagine the logistics. I cannot. Like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, for you, Hillary, this time around is like a very different way of processing a race, not only in a different country, but also just coming off Mammoth is like,
Yes.
whoa.
I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys have toilets and all these things here. Wow, that's amazing. I know how much work goes into that. Like, so funny.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll never
It's
take
so
any
good.
station for granted. But yeah, just like really cool. And I mean, for Fuzhao's race, she was like neck and neck with, so her and the woman that actually, spoiler, because it's not really a huge part of our film, but ended up winning was a Solomon athlete. And they were within 5 minutes of each other for the entire race,
Easy. Yeah, it
100
was a
kilometers.
they were racing that whole race. That was insane.
Yeah. And that's just the caliber of athletes that are coming out of China right now. And they're working so hard and they're so driven. And if anything, it just sort of like fired us up because like the future of trail running is so freaking cool, you guys. And there's so many people that are excited about it and it's opening up their world. And whether you're racing in China or you're racing internationally, or you have the chance to go to China or to go to somewhere like this to experience culture through trail running, how freaking cool. Like, I just kind
How
of came
freaking
away
cool.
amped.
Yes, so amped. And something that like just on a kind of a boring logistics, but actually huge for runners to take advantage of, this new 10-day visa-free transit that China has opened up, I think will be really great for athletes. This can make it a lot easier to plan a race and like go and participate and get to experience it without feeling intimidated by the visa process. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's pretty awesome.
that kind of blew our minds. Yeah, without going into the nuts and bolts, you can now go in to China for up to 10 days and run the race or whatever in like all these kind of areas that they've got designated. But it was really simple for us to sort of figure it out and to do it and to go over there and not need to go through the whole visa application and embassies and all that. So that was really cool. And I do think things like that totally open up the door in the future for
Definitely.
just like more travel like that. So yeah, it was, I mean, just incredible. The whole experience. And I mean, Hong Kong, like I loved Hong Kong as well. I felt
Oh my gosh.
like Hong Kong is such an amazing city.
We were
And
calling it our city within, like, 5 minutes of being there. We're like, "Oh, yes, we're home." Like, this is our city.
totally. It's so international, but also still has so much character. Obviously, the food is incredible. The trails there are really interesting. I think, like a lot gets said about the stairs and the fact that they've sort of had to build up the trails because of, I think, the rains and the erosion and all that. But you're on these crazy ridges, like above the city really quickly. The trail access there is really cool. And so I think just again, appreciating where people live, getting the chance through this film to go to all of our like subjects' homes and see like what is trail running for you. And this is something I like love to think about, especially as someone that lives in LA. But like trail running looks different for everybody, and it's not always like getting into the mountains. But I love seeing what that looks like for an everyday run, and just like how we make it part of our lives. Even when it's not that glamorous or whatever, but it's just like we all have a different relationship with the trails near us.
Totally. And I think another cool thing about traveling with trail running is it takes, like, this whole edge off of, like, feeling like a misfit in a new culture because like you said, like the way that that race was organized in Ninghai was like, oh yeah, we know this. We know how to operate in these spaces. And it just like creates a connection point. And I love that about sport. I feel like sport does that in so many different ways, but the running community is, yeah, it's such a cool way to experience new cultures because there's this instant connection point, and I really like that too.
Yeah, I know. It's my favorite part of travel. It's my favorite way of relating to other people. I think it's something that you've had as a thread through your films, whether that's free to run, whether that's off course. Like trail running is sort of the umbrella to tell bigger life stories. And I think that's something I'm really proud of with our film is it's like we're telling the story, and Western States is the backdrop to life in so many ways, and to these women's experiences with life, and how they've been shaped by trail running, but also just the things that they're overcoming in life in order to make this possible, and in order to kind of compete and to perform at this level. But just like, it's so human and it's so relatable in so many ways. And so, I mean, that's what I'm really hoping as we pull this film together, which now we're like deep in the edit, and really excited. We've got a female editor, actually the same editor, Leslie, that you worked with on your last film, Off Course, which is really cool.
Yes.
And, we
Yes.
didn't set out to have a female editor, but I do think it's really awesome. And it's really fun to be able to dive into a story with another woman and bring her into that. And I'm just like really excited to see what we create. But I feel very, very lucky to have had all these women let us into their lives over the last 6 months as we've been filming this, and that is something like, I go back to this whole conversation of just like, what a privilege to tell these stories. And right now, I think we're just trying to do it justice, right? Because these stories are so powerful and so meaningful and so different, all of them, and different maybe than we expected when we went into this whole film.
Yeah, and the way that like we've gotten to know the women through working with them then reveals new things you couldn't have guessed, because you do get to spend that time together, like off camera, sharing meals, hiking into where you're going to film, hanging out with each other's families. Like there's a lot that goes into it that I think then allows you to sort of get a better sense of like, oh man, who is this person really? Because we all have these perceptions, especially with elite athletes. Like we have these perceptions of who different athletes are just from this little tiny snippet we get of their lives. So I think that's pretty cool to get that time with them. Like we want to, like, it'd be great to do a whole film on each woman. Like they all need more time in a film for sure.
Totally, I agree. That's our biggest challenge right now, is how to condense like 80 hours worth of amazing footage into 40 minutes. Yes.
Yes.
Oh boy. But yeah, no, to your point, I think it's something I think about a lot with storytelling, is like, by the time the camera's rolling, what you get out of that interview is directly related to what you've put into the relationship, and how you've been able to connect with that person. And in order to connect with that person, you have to be vulnerable and human and real about your life too. And I think that's something that it's taught me a lot as a filmmaker, and just over the last decade of just, who do I want to be and how do I want to show up in a way that lets other people feel comfortable and safe, so that they can also be real and honest. And it's, I think, just like really informed my whole way of relating to people. Even this podcast, I think when we started it, I felt so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, every episode I have to listen back and make sure I'm not saying something that is wrong or weird, like almost self-censoring. And then at some point you realize, like, this is me, this is my life. I'm not always perfect. It's going to be messy sometimes, but also like, there's nobody that's perfect. There's nobody that's got all their shit together. And so if we can all just sort of agree that we're going to meet on a place of being human and letting each other in, I just think like that's a beautiful place to start.
Yeah. Oh man, that's super well said. And I think for, you and I, Hilary, also being in the field together as women who haven't worked together yet, and then also being with our film subjects, like two things can be true at once. I can need reps weighting the stabilizer, which is this motorized thing that holds our camera so it runs smoothly. And I can also know how to do my job. Like both of those things can coexist. So if we show our vulnerability of like, I need to practice this a little bit more, it doesn't take the other thing like away. And I feel like we got to really experience that in a cool way of like, okay, yeah, I need a little help with this, or I need help with that. Or, one of our athletes opening up about this thing in life, but then obviously they're a trail crusher. Like, we can have all these nuances to who we are. And it's okay to talk about some of those things we need a little bit extra with because it doesn't negate the other aspects of who we are.
Totally. I was laughing about that this morning. Actually, I was thinking about how there was a few times when I was like adjusting settings on the fly, and like, I'm newer to video than Carrie is. Like, my strength has always been photography, and the filmmaking has been the last few years sort of influenced by Billy, also influenced by just wanting to tell bigger stories, that have more complexity to them. But there's definitely times where I'm like adjusting things and I'm talking to Carrie, and I've got this like stream of consciousness basically talking about how I'm sucking at what I'm doing. And then I'd look at her and I'd be like, I don't know if I should be saying all this out loud, but also, yeah, like, let's celebrate and normalize not being perfect and not having it all together, and not being afraid to say when we don't understand something. And that's
Yes.
shout out to Billy, my husband. He's really good at that. If he doesn't understand it, or if he doesn't understand an acronym that everyone else seems to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, he'll be like, what is that? Just tell me.
Mm,
And it's something I'm really trying to learn in my own life because I think it's an amazing thing. And just like the humility that it kind of takes to say when you don't know something, but also like it's just going to make everyone's lives easier if you're just like, hey, like I don't understand this. Can you run this through one more time? And so I felt like that was a great basis for our whole trip and just sort of like how we worked through this. And then on the other side, it's like having grace for each other and being able to just like kind of work through it all together is beautiful because then it's very safe and it's sort of like, yeah, we're just all doing our best here, guys. And,
yes.
like we're going to create something amazing and it's not going to be without its challenges, but like we're going to get
Yep.
there. And yeah,
Totally.
it's fun, right? Like that's what makes
Yeah.
for a cool partnership. And I think it's just, oh my gosh, we are dreaming up all the things that we can keep working on together because it is really cool when you get to do something like this. And I think it just makes me realize just like how important that is for my life and how much it adds to what I'm doing to be able to share it with you. And so
Mm.
I hope that comes through with this film and just like, it's been a ride. It's been so much fun so far.
I know, yeah, it's been incredible. I feel the same way with that. Yeah, just having like a collaboration where there is you have each other's backs. And then that creates like such a cool place to create from because you can bring your full self each day into the project because your whole self is accepted in that project, which is
Mm.
really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, could you imagine if we weren't telling each other like all the insecurities and all the things, and then you were like sleeping in the same hotel room? There's nowhere to get away, like you're just bottling up all of
Yeah.
this. So just let it out, guys. Just, be
Yes.
you. um, but yeah, as far as the film is concerned, I'll just sort of tease that we are hoping to be premiering it at the Western States Lottery Weekend. That is the goal right now. And Hoka, we're working with them to sort of figure out what that's going to look like. But there will be some sort of premiere that weekend. So if you're planning on coming up to the lottery, it's going to be really fun. We don't have the exact details yet. We'll share them when I have them, but probably later on that same day as the lottery draw. And then from there, if you're not able to make it in person to Auburn, there will obviously be other opportunities to see this, and we'll sort of be able to roll that out and hopefully some good in-person opportunities, because that's really important to us too, is to like use this film as a way to bring other women together and just create more space and more opportunity for women to feel supported, to feel like they've got the community around them to do these cool things. Because I think that's a message that we're hearing loud and clear from the film, right? Is like community matters and being supported and feeling the encouragement from other women, even when we are pushing, even when we are sort of like trying to see what's possible, but doing that in a way that's loving and respectful and sort of a like emphatic, like F yes, instead of pushing each other down. And so, yeah, we're going to try to keep doing that with the film and hopefully we can create some more momentum. It's the goal.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully when we get to screen, it's just going to be like a time to celebrate and then like get amped and build some energy for like, okay, yes, and like, yes, we get to celebrate and take a moment. And what are we going to do next to keep opening the space for more women in underrepresented communities, in others, in ways that we still have so much room to grow in. So I'm really excited for that.
I love the yes and. I think it's such a good way to approach life. And it's like, it's so easy to get kind of stuck in the grind sometimes and to just feel a little bit overwhelmed by sort of where we are. And it's like you kind of create your own like limits on yourself by doing that. And when you say yes
Totally.
and, it's sort of like it's pushing back against that. It's sort of saying like, yes, I can do this, but also what else am I going to look for? Because this is meaningful, this is important, like just sort of like
Yeah.
it's a positive thing. So I love that. That's my word of the day, my two words of the day. Yes and. Yes, and I want to spend the rest of the day diving through hours and hours of transcripts. Yes.
Yeah, same. Exactly how we're spending our afternoon.
Yeah,
Yes. And I'll
but
take another interview.
totally. And maybe a nap. No, it's just me. And my too many time zones right now. We just got back from a trip yesterday, so it's been busy. But yeah, no, Thank you, Carrie. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for the friendship that we built through this film. And I'm so inspired by you and the life that you're building. And I know it doesn't come without sacrifices, like we didn't even get to touch on the fact that you and Tim moved into a van full time and you basically are on the road your entire lives so that you can just like tell these stories and be mobile and be flexible and just like all the things that you've poured into creating this. But it is so inspiring to see you truly living out your dream. It is, kind of amazing that that's the name of your film company because it is what you're doing. And I think if anything, I hope that we're all reminded to have big dreams and to go after them. And it doesn't always mean it's going to be easy or linear or any of that, but just like, why not,
Yeah, yeah, thank you. That's really kind. And you know, I, I feel like we've done a good job of celebrating how much we love each other on this
Yeah, I know. If you get anything, people are
podcast.
like, we get it. Enough already.
Hillary, you are like, you're taking action on things that you want to see happen in trail running and taking that leadership role. And that's huge. Like, the whole reason we're working on this Western States film is because you saw the gap and you're like, wait, why isn't this getting made? Oh, I guess I'll go make it because it needs to be made. And that's what we need more of. So, I'm here for it. And I'm just cheering you on, and I have so much respect for what you and the ladies on this podcast are doing as well for women in sport. So yeah, so good.
Thank you, friend.
Yeah.
Well, all the love. Thank you to all of our listeners for being along on the ride with this pod. And I really do believe that there's a cool intersection between trail running and all the other parts of life. And hopefully, just chatting with Carrie and thinking about some of the journeys that you're storytelling around and just like all the multifaceted parts of being human is a good reminder for all of us to yeah, it's not always easy, but you're not in it alone. And I think building a support network of women around you and people around you and just all of us sort of like wrapping around arms around each other is going to make the world a little bit better. And so that's the goal. And absolute absolute pleasure. Can't talk anymore. I'm talked out. Thank you for being on the pod today, and we are excited to share more about this project with you guys. If you don't already follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram at the Trail Network Pod. We'd also like to give a special shout out to our brand new sponsor, Precision, for all of their hydration and fueling support for the podcast. We're really grateful to have them on board for this next year, and also to our OG sponsor, Osprey, for all of their continued support. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you soon.